Tom Reed stood before the projection of his ship design, watching as the admirals and generals exchanged skeptical glances. The hologram showed a sleek vessel unlike any warship humanity had ever built, its lines graceful yet menacing. The room remained silent for a long moment after his presentation ended. "Mr. Reed," Admiral Walker finally said, rubbing his weathered face, "this is the third time you've brought this fantasy to our attention. With all due respect, sir, the Phantom isn't fantasy. The math works. The physics works." Tom pointed to the engine schematics. "This core design can generate twice the power of our current battleships at half the size." General Morris laughed. "And I suppose it can also make my coffee and shine my boots." The room filled with chuckles. Tom's cheeks burned, but he stood his ground. He was used to this. For 5 years, the military brass had dismissed his designs, called them impossible, impractical, the dreams of a man who spent too much time in theoretical physics and not enough in reality. "The swarm took 3 more colonies last month," Tom said quietly. The laughter stopped. "Our current ships can't match their technology. We need something they won't expect." "And that's your ghost ship?" Admiral Walker asked. "The Phantom, sir. Yes." The latest battle footage played on the wall screen. Earth ships burning against the black of space, outmatched by the organic-looking vessels of the swarm. Humanity had been fighting a losing war for 8 years now. Each year, the aliens pushed closer to Earth. "We've lost 30% of our fleet in the last year alone," Tom continued. "Standard designs aren't working. We need to think differently." Admiral Walker studied the blueprint again. "Even if, and that's a big if, your design works on paper, we don't have the resources to build experimental ships. Everything we have goes to maintaining the current fleet." "Sir, I'm not asking for a fleet, just one prototype." A communications officer burst into the room. "Admiral, the swarm has broken through at Proxima Centauri. The colony is gone. The 6th Fleet." There, the young man couldn't finish. The room exploded into activity. Amid the chaos, Tom stood still, watching as the defeat registered on the faces of Earth's military leadership. Admiral Walker turned to Tom after issuing emergency orders. His face looked 10 years older than it had minutes before. "Reed, how fast could you build this thing if we gave you resources?" Tom blinked in surprise. "With a proper team and facility, 9 months. You have 6 months and whatever we can spare, which isn't much." The Admiral pointed a finger at Tom's chest. "But hear me. If you waste our time and materials on a fantasy while we're fighting for survival, I'll personally see you court-martialed." "Understood." Tom nodded, his heart pounding. "Yes, sir. I won't let you down." The next day, Tom received his assignment: an abandoned shipyard on the far side of the moon, minimal materials, and authorization to recruit a small team. Most career military personnel refused to join what they were already calling Reed's folly. In the end, Tom found his crew among the outcasts and misfits. Jane Miller, a weapons specialist who had been demoted after questioning military doctrine. Marcus Bell, a pilot whose unorthodox flying methods had earned him as many reprimands as medals. Kate Wilson, a programmer so young she still had acne, but whose code could make systems sing. And Jack Parker, a mechanic with hands calloused from 40 years of fixing ships everyone else thought beyond repair. They gathered in the dusty control room of the abandoned lunar shipyard, staring at the empty construction bay through the viewport. "So this is it. This is where we build the miracle ship?" Jack asked, running a finger through the dust on a console. Tom projected the Phantom's design into the center of the room. The blue light illuminated their skeptical faces. "This warship is going to save humanity," Tom said with quiet certainty. "Right now, it's just a pretty picture," Jane observed. 6 months from now, it'll be the ship that changes the tide of war," Tom replied. "Let's get to work." The lunar shipyard came alive with activity as Tom's team began their impossible task. Each morning, they gathered around a small table, in what they now called the War Room, planning their day's work over cups of bitter coffee. "We need better materials for the outer hull," Jane said, pointing to the schematics. "These standard alloys won't handle the stress from the core." Tom nodded. "I know, but we won't get them through official channels." Marcus leaned forward with a sly smile. "I know some people at the scrapyards of Europa. Ships damaged beyond repair get sent there. Good materials going to waste. You want to build humanity's last hope from garbage?" Jack asked, raising a bushy eyebrow. "One man's trash is another man's warship," Marcus replied with a wink. Kate, who rarely spoke during these meetings, looked up from her tablet. "I've been running simulations on the energy core. The military thinks it's impossible because they're using standard models. But if we change the approach," she turned her tablet around to show a complex diagram, "we can make it work." Tom studied her calculations with growing excitement. "This is brilliant, Kate." Over the next weeks, their unconventional approach began to yield results. Marcus returned from Europa with a shuttle full of salvaged materials from destroyed battleships, metals forged with techniques that couldn't be replicated due to resource shortages. Jack disassembled and rebuilt systems with his gifted hands, making modifications that didn't exist in any manual. Yet for every step forward, there were 2 steps back. Word spread through the military about Reed's folly, and supply shipments mysteriously disappeared or arrived late. Equipment malfunctioned in suspicious ways. 3 months in, Admiral Walker made a surprise inspection. He walked through the half-built skeleton of the Phantom, his face revealing nothing. "You're behind schedule," he finally said. "We've had some setbacks," Tom admitted. "Setbacks?" The Admiral gestured to the ship. "This looks like a junkyard experiment, Reed. The Joint Chiefs are questioning my judgment in approving this project." "Sir, if you could just—" "We lost the Arcturus system yesterday," Walker interrupted, his voice tight. 12 ships gone. 30,000 colonists. He turned to face Tom directly. "I'm giving you 30 more days. If this ship isn't showing serious progress by then, I'm pulling the plug and sending your team back to regular duty." After the Admiral left, a heavy silence fell over the team. "We can't do it," Jack finally said. "Not in 30 days. "We have to," Tom replied. "We're not just building a ship, we're building a chance for humanity to survive." That night, Tom worked alone in the shipyard, making adjustments to the core housing. His eyes burned from fatigue, and his hands shook from too much caffeine and too little sleep. "You should rest," Jane said, appearing beside him. She had dark circles under her eyes too. "Can't. Not enough time." Jane handed him a tool. "Then let me help." One by one, the others appeared. Marcus, Jack, Kate. Without a word, they took up tools and began to work. That night became the first of many. They worked in shifts around the clock, catching sleep when they could. By day 28, the ship had taken proper form. Its hull gleamed under the work lights, unlike any vessel ever built by human hands. But the core, the heart of Tom's design, remained untested. "If it doesn't work, we're done," Jane said as they gathered around the central chamber. Kate made one final adjustment to her program. "It will work." Tom took a deep breath and nodded to Jack, who threw the main switch. The lights dimmed throughout the shipyard as power diverted to the startup sequence. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft blue glow emanated from the core. It pulsed once, twice, and steadied into a humming field of energy. Systems throughout the ship began to come online, displays lighting up one after another. "It works," Tom whispered, almost unable to believe it. "It actually works." Marcus laughed, slapping Tom on the back. "Of course it works. It was never a fantasy, just ahead of its time." As they celebrated, none of them noticed the small drone hovering outside the viewport, transmitting images back to an unknown location. Someone else was very interested in the Phantom's progress. Admiral Walker stood with arms crossed, watching the Phantom through the control room window. The ship floated in the launch bay, its sleek form unlike any vessel in Earth's fleet. Even skeptical military officials had fallen silent at the sight of it. "It's ready for a test flight," Tom explained, trying to keep his voice steady. After 6 months of work, countless setbacks, and several near failures, they had done what everyone said was impossible. "And who exactly will pilot this thing?" the Admiral asked. Marcus stepped forward. "I will, sir." Walker frowned. "Bell, your flight record is exactly what this ship needs." Tom interrupted. "The Phantom doesn't fly like conventional ships. Marcus understands its capabilities better than anyone." News had just reached them that the swarm had taken New Mars, Earth's largest colony. 20 million people gone in a day. Earth couldn't afford to wait any longer. "Fine," Walker finally said. "One test flight. Low risk, minimal distance." 2 hours later, the Phantom moved slowly out of the lunar shipyard. Inside the cockpit, Marcus sat at controls that looked more like a pianist's keyboard than a pilot's station. "All systems online," Kate reported from her station. "Core energy stable. Comms are clear," Jane added. "No sign of swarm activity in the sector." Tom took the seat beside Marcus, his heart pounding. "Take her out easy. Let's see what she can do." Marcus grinned. "Buckle up." His hands danced across the controls, and the Phantom responded instantly. The ship accelerated with impossible grace, leaving the moon behind in seconds. "This is incredible," Marcus whispered as the ship reached speeds no human vessel had achieved before. "She moves like she's reading my mind." Jack's voice came through the comms. "Engine performance exceeding expectations. The core is barely warm." Tom smiled. Everything was working just as he had designed it. Better, even. "Let's try the stealth systems," he suggested. Jane activated the sequence. "Stealth mode engaged. According to our sensors, we've disappeared." "Not just from sensors," Kate added excitedly, pointing at a display showing external camera views. "The light-bending technology is working. We're actually invisible to the naked eye." The test flight continued flawlessly until a sudden alarm blared through the ship. "Unknown vessel approaching," Jane called out, "coming in fast from the dark side of Saturn." "Swarm?" Tom asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Jane studied her display. "Looks like a scout ship. Small, probably on a reconnaissance mission." "They shouldn't be able to see us," Kate said, fingers flying over her console. "They can't," Jane confirmed. "They're not heading for us. Just passing through." Tom looked at Marcus. "We should head back." But Marcus hesitated, his eyes fixed on the approaching scout ship. "Do you know how many people those things have killed? How much data they send back to the main fleet?" "This isn't a combat mission," Tom reminded him. "It should be," Marcus muttered. The scout ship passed within 1,000 kilometers of their position, completely unaware of the Phantom's presence. Then something unexpected happened. The Phantom's weapons system activated on its own. "What's happening?" Tom demanded as targeting displays lit up around them. Kate looked panicked. "The ship's adaptive AI is identifying the scout as a threat. It's engaging defensive protocols." "Override it," Tom ordered. "I'm trying." Before they could stop it, a beam of concentrated energy erupted from the Phantom's main weapon array. It struck the swarm scout with pinpoint accuracy. The alien vessel didn't explode. It simply came apart, disintegrating into space dust. Stunned silence filled the cockpit. "Did we just?" Marcus began. "Yes," Jane said, staring at her readings in disbelief. "We just destroyed a swarm ship with a single shot. No Earth weapon has ever done that before." Alarms blared as communications from the lunar base flooded in. Their unauthorized kill had been detected. "Admiral Walker is ordering us to return immediately," Jane reported. Tom leaned back in his chair, mind racing. The Phantom wasn't just a breakthrough in propulsion and stealth. Its weapons were beyond anything he had dared to hope for. Head back, he told Marcus. But take the long way. I want to see everything this ship can do first. As Marcus turned the Phantom toward home, Tom made a decision. He knew what would happen when they returned. The military would take the ship apart, study it piece by piece, and maybe, years from now, they'd build something similar. By then, Earth might already be lost. We might not be coming back, he said quietly to his crew. 4 pairs of eyes turned to him, understanding dawning in each face. Where would we go? Kate asked. Tom's gaze turned toward the stars, where we're needed most. 3 days after their return to base, the Phantom sat locked down in a high-security dock. Military scientists swarmed around it like ants, taking measurements and readings. Tom and his crew had been separated for questioning about the destroyed Swarm Scout. Tom sat alone in a small room when Admiral Walker entered, tossing a folder onto the table. You know what these are? Walker asked. Tom opened the folder to see dismantling orders. You're taking apart the only weapon that's ever destroyed a swarm ship with a single shot. We need to understand how it works. It works because it's a complete system. Take it apart, and you lose what makes it special. Tom looked up at the Admiral. Put my crew back on that ship. Let us take the fight to the swarm. Walker shook his head. Too risky. One ship, no matter how advanced, can't win this war. But it can buy time for Earth to build more. The decision is made. Read. The Phantom will be studied. In time, we'll build a proper fleet based on your technology. In time. Tom stood up, his voice rising. We don't have time. The swarm is preparing for their final push to Earth. We need to act now. The Admiral's expression hardened. This conversation is over. You and your team are confined to base until further notice. That night, Tom gathered his crew in Kate's quarters. She had disabled the security cameras, giving them a few minutes of privacy. They're going to destroy everything we built, Tom said quietly. Marcus punched the wall. I told you this would happen. What can we do? Jane asked. We're locked down. The ship is guarded. Kate smiled faintly. Not exactly. I've been in their systems. The guards change at 200 hours. There's a 5-minute window when only automated security is watching the Phantom. Jack raised an eyebrow. And the automated security? Already taken care of, Kate replied. I wrote half their code, remember? Tom looked at each of his crew members. What I'm suggesting is mutiny. If we do this, we can never come back. Back to what? Marcus asked. Earth is losing. If we stay, we die anyway. I'm in, Jane said firmly. Jack sighed. Too old for this nonsense, but too old to start over too. Count me in. Kate nodded. We built her. We should fly her. 5 hours later, alarms blared throughout the base as the Phantom broke from its moorings and accelerated away from the moon. Inside, the crew worked frantically at their stations. Multiple pursuit vessels launching, Jane reported. Military interceptors. They're fast. Not fast enough, Marcus said, his hands dancing over the controls. The Phantom shot forward, leaving Earth and its defenders far behind. As they approached the jump point, Kate activated the experimental faster-than-light drive that had never been tested. Jump calculations complete, she announced. But Tom, I have to warn you. This is all theoretical. We could end up anywhere or nowhere. Tom took a deep breath. Do it. Space twisted around them. Stars blurred into streaks of light, then vanished completely as the Phantom entered the jump. Everyone was pressed into their seats by forces that seemed to pull at their very atoms. Then, suddenly, calm. The ship emerged into normal space. Where are we? Tom asked, his voice hoarse. Jane checked her instruments. Sector 47, deep in swarm territory. The crew exchanged nervous glances. They had jumped farther than any human ship ever had, right into the heart of enemy space. Stealth systems active, Kate reported. We're invisible to their sensors. Now what? Jack asked. Tom moved to the main viewing screen, which showed a massive structure in the distance, a swarm production facility turning out ships by the dozens. "Now we do what this ship was built for," Tom said. "We fight back." Over the next week, the Phantoms struck throughout swarm territory. They destroyed supply depots, communication relays, and smaller outposts. Their hit-and-run tactics were something the swarm had never encountered before, an enemy they couldn't see or track, appearing and disappearing at will. After each attack, Marcus would jump the ship to a new location, making it impossible for the swarm to predict their movements. The Phantom's energy core never faltered. Its weapons never failed. "They're starting to change their patterns," Jane observed after their 12th successful raid. "Look at these fleet movements. They're diverting ships from the Earth offensive to hunt for us." "Good," Tom said. "That's exactly what we wanted." But their success had consequences. The swarm began adapting. Their sensors were being modified, their ships traveling in tighter formations. And something else was happening. A single swarm command ship had begun following the Phantom's trail of destruction. It was bigger than the others, with distinctive markings on its organic hull. "They've assigned a hunter," Jane said grimly. "They won't stop until they find us." Marcus grinned. "Let them try." The Phantom shuddered as it emerged from a jump, damage visible along its port side. Inside, emergency lights bathed the crew in red. Jack worked frantically to repair a coolant line while sparks showered around him. "Status report," Tom called over the alarms. "Jump drive is strained but functional," Kate reported, her face illuminated by her console. "2 more jumps at most before we need major repairs." Jane wiped blood from a cut on her forehead. "Weapons at 60% capacity. That last swarm ambush nearly got us." Their most recent raid had gone badly. The swarm hunter ship, the one they now called Void Hunter for its black hull and relentless pursuit, had anticipated their attack pattern. For the first time, the Phantom had been hit. "We need somewhere to hide and make repairs," Tom said, studying the star chart. Marcus pointed to a small planet on the display. "Here, this world was glassed by the swarm years ago. Their patrols rarely visit dead planets." "Set course," Tom ordered. "Minimal power. We can't risk detection." The Phantom limped through space, its normally bright energy signature dimmed to avoid attention. Hours later, they entered orbit around a desolate planet. Its surface was scorched and barren, evidence of the swarm's brutal efficiency. "I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the surface," Jane said, frowning at her instruments. "Not swarm technology. Something else." "Survivors?" Kate asked hopefully. Jane shook her head. "No life signs, but there's a structure that seems mostly intact near the equator." Tom made a quick decision. "Jane, Marcus, you're with me. We'll check it out. Kate and Jack, continue repairs on the ship." The shuttle ride to the surface was rough, the planet's atmosphere filled with dust and debris. They landed near a massive structure half buried in the ground. Unlike the devastation around it, this building seemed to have resisted the swarm attack. "It's ancient," Jane said as they approached the entrance. "Much older than the swarm invasion." Inside, they found corridors lined with strange symbols and rooms filled with dust-covered technology. Marcus swept his light over a large mural that depicted beings similar to humans battling creatures that looked eerily like the swarm. "This can't be a coincidence," Tom muttered, running his fingers over the images. In the center of the structure, they discovered a chamber containing a pedestal. On it sat a device that glowed with the same blue energy as the Phantom's core. "This is impossible," Jane whispered. "This technology. It's identical to our core design." Tom stared at the device, memories flooding back. "My parents were archaeologists. Before they died, they studied ancient ruins. I used to play with their artifacts as a child." His voice grew quiet. "The designs for the Phantom. They came to me in dreams. I always thought it was just my imagination." "You're saying you saw this technology before?" Marcus asked incredulously. "Not consciously. But yes, Tom approached the pedestal. This civilization fought the swarm before us, and they developed weapons to fight them. Jane was examining data crystals found nearby. She inserted one into her portable reader. Tom, look at this. It's a star map showing swarm hive worlds. Vital strategic information. Tom's mind raced. We weren't the first to face the swarm, and we weren't the first to develop this technology. But that civilization fell anyway. Why? Marcus asked. Because they didn't complete their work, Jane said, reading from the crystal. This facility was a research station. They were developing a weapon that could target the swarm's hive mind communication. They never finished it before they were wiped out. Tom looked at the core device, then back at the data. But we might be able to. A distant explosion rocked the structure, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. What was that? Marcus asked, drawing his weapon. Jane checked her scanner. Multiple swarm ships entering the atmosphere. The Void Hunter is leading them. How did they find us? Tom demanded. The energy signature from this chamber, Jane realized. It matches our core. They must have detected it when we activated these systems. Marcus pointed to another exit. There's a tunnel network underneath. We can use it to circle back to the shuttle. As they gathered the ancient data crystals and prepared to flee, Tom took one last look at the chamber. The civilization that built this place had come so close to defeating the swarm, only to fall at the final hurdle. We won't make the same mistake, he promised quietly, taking the small core device from the pedestal. We'll finish what you started. They ran into the tunnels as swarm dropships landed outside. The race was on, not just to escape, but to bring this vital information back to the Phantom, and eventually, to Earth. The Phantom emerged from its final jump with warning lights flashing across every console. Earth loomed ahead, surrounded by the remnants of its defense fleet. Tom and his crew had been gone for 23 days. Multiple ships approaching, Jane announced. Earth Defense Forces. They're targeting us. Open communications, Tom ordered. Unidentified vessel, you have entered restricted space. Power down and prepare to be boarded, came the stern voice of a fleet commander. This is Tom Reed of the Phantom. We need to speak with Admiral Walker immediately. A long pause followed. Then a familiar voice replaced the commander's. Reed, is that really you? Admiral Walker sounded both angry and relieved. You stole a military prototype and disappeared for over 3 weeks. Give me one reason why I shouldn't blow you out of the sky. Tom took a deep breath. Because we know how to defeat the swarm, and we need to act fast. The Phantom was escorted to Earth's largest remaining shipyard. Armed guards met them at the airlock, but so did Admiral Walker. His face was haggard, with new lines etched by weeks of losses. The Joint Chiefs want you executed for treason, Walker said bluntly as they walked through the facility. What's the situation here? Tom asked, ignoring the threat. Walker's jaw tightened. We've lost contact with the outer colonies. The swarm has assembled the largest fleet we've ever detected. Intelligence says they'll reach Earth within 5 days. Tom nodded grimly. That tracks with what we found. But there's hope. In a secure briefing room, Tom and his crew presented everything they had discovered. The ancient civilization, the technology that predated humanity's encounter with the swarm, and most importantly, the swarm's vulnerability. Their ships communicate through a quantum network, Jane explained, displaying the data they had recovered. It's how they coordinate so effectively. But the network has a frequency pattern that can be disrupted. Kate continued, I've modified our weapons based on the ancient designs. Instead of trying to destroy swarm ships one by one, we can target their communication network directly. Military scientists and engineers listened skeptically until Jack stepped forward and placed the small device they had recovered on the table. This is the prototype the ancients built, Jack said. We've integrated it with the Phantom systems. It works. We tested it on a small swarm patrol during our return journey. Admiral Walker studied the device. Even if this works, one ship can't take on the entire swarm fleet. Not alone, Tom agreed. But we've brought complete schematics. Earth's remaining ships can be modified with this technology. He looked around the room. We need every engineer, every manufacturing facility working on these modifications immediately. Walker was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to his aide. Get me the Joint Chiefs. Priority Alpha. For the next 3 days, Earth became a frenzy of activity. The Phantom served as the template, with engineers working around the clock to adapt its technology to existing ships. Tom barely slept, moving from one facility to another, explaining the concepts he had once been ridiculed for proposing. Kate's coding team worked miracles, creating software patches that could be quickly deployed to Earth's fleet. Jane trained weapons officers on the new targeting systems. Jack oversaw the physical modifications to ship cores. Marcus, meanwhile, trained pilots on new tactics developed during their time in swarm territory. Don't think like human pilots, he told them. The Phantom taught us a new way to fly. Be unpredictable. Use three-dimensional thinking. On the 4th day, long-range sensors detected the swarm fleet entering the solar system. Thousands of ships, more than Earth had ever faced at once. They're ahead of schedule, Walker said grimly during the final briefing. How many of our ships have been modified? 42, Tom reported. Less than half of what we have left. Walker nodded. It will have to be enough. He looked at Tom. The Phantom will lead the first attack group. I'll command the second wave from the flagship. Sir, Tom said hesitantly, the Void Hunter will be with them. It's been tracking us, learning our movements. It's different from other swarm vessels, more adaptive. Then we take it out first, Walker said with finality. As the meeting ended, Walker pulled Tom aside. For what it's worth, Reed, I was wrong about your ship. It wasn't a fantasy. Tom managed a small smile. Not anymore, sir. That night, as the Phantom underwent its final adjustments, Tom stood at the viewport, looking at the stars. Soon, those stars would be filled with the largest battle humanity had ever fought. Couldn't sleep either, Jane asked, joining him. Just thinking about how far we've come, Tom replied. From a rejected design to Earth's last hope. Jane placed her hand on his. We've done everything we can. Now we fight. Tom nodded, watching Earth's fleet assemble in the distance. Tomorrow would decide the fate of humanity. The darkness of space lit up with the flashes of weapons fire. Earth's modified fleet moved in formation against the vastly larger swarm armada. At the front, the Phantom led the charge, its systems operating at full capacity. Approaching primary engagement range, Jane announced from her station. Swarm vessels moving to intercept. All ships maintain formation. Tom ordered through the fleet-wide channel. Remember your training. Wait for my signal before activating the disruption network. The first wave of swarm fighters broke against Earth's defenses. Modified ships absorbed energy attacks that would have destroyed them weeks earlier. The new shield technology, based on the ancient designs, didn't just block enemy fire, it converted it to power. They're trying to surround us, Marcus warned, his hands dancing across the flight controls. Classic pincer movement. Tom studied the tactical display. That's because they think we're fighting conventionally. Let them get closer. The space around them, filled with swarm vessels, their organic hulls pulsing with angry red energy. Earth ships took hits, some faltering but most holding firm. There, Jane said suddenly, pointing to a massive ship moving through the swarm formation. The Void Hunter. Unlike the other swarm vessels, Void Hunter moved with purpose, heading directly for the Phantom. It seemed to know exactly where they were despite their stealth systems. It's tracking our energy signature, Kate realized. It remembers us from the ancient planet. Tom made his decision. All ships. Execute Pattern Omega. Target the quantum network now. Throughout Earth's fleet, the modified weapons came online. Instead of firing at individual swarm ships, they projected energy at frequencies the human eyes couldn't see. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the swarm vessels faltered. Their perfect formation began to break apart as ships lost coordination with each other. Some drifted aimlessly while others fired at empty space. "It's working," Jane exclaimed. "Their network is disrupted." But the Void Hunter remained unaffected. It accelerated toward the Phantom, firing weapons that tore through space with frightening accuracy. "Evasive maneuvers," Tom ordered as the ship rocked from a near miss. Marcus spun the Phantom in an impossible turn, but the Void Hunter matched them move for move. A direct hit shook the ship, throwing crew members against their restraints. "Port shields down to 30%, Jack reported from engineering. "We can't take many more hits like that." Tom watched as Earth's fleet began to gain the advantage against the confused swarm ships. The plan was working, except for Void Hunter. "It's adapted," Tom realized. "It's not using the quantum network anymore. It's fighting on its own." "So much for the perfect plan," Marcus muttered, dodging another attack. Tom's mind raced. If one swarm ship could adapt this quickly, soon others would follow. They needed to end this now. "Kate, what would happen if we overloaded the core with the ancient device connected?" Kate's eyes widened. "A cascade reaction. It would create a pulse that could disable any ship using similar technology to ours or the swarms, but the Phantom would be destroyed in the process." Tom looked around at his crew. These misfits who had believed in his fantasy when no one else would, who had risked everything to make it real. "Admiral Walker," Tom called over the comm. "We need to take out Void Hunter before it teaches the others how to adapt. We're going to overload our core." "Reed, that's suicide," Walker responded immediately. "It's necessary," Tom replied calmly. "Get your ships clear of the blast radius." Jane looked at him. "Tom, there must be another way." "There isn't time," he said softly. Marcus set a collision course with Void Hunter. Marcus hesitated, then nodded grimly. The Phantom turned sharply, accelerating directly toward the massive swarm command ship. "Jack, begin the core overload sequence," Tom ordered. "Already on it," the old mechanic replied. "It's been an honor, sir." As the Phantom closed the distance to Void Hunter, Tom opened a channel to his crew. "Anyone who wants to use the escape pod should go now." No one moved. "We started this together," Jane said, taking his hand. "We'll finish it together." Kate's voice trembled slightly as she reported, "Core overload in 30 seconds. The Void Hunter, sensing something was wrong, tried to veer away, but the Phantom matched its every move, closing the gap. 20 seconds. 10. "For Earth," Tom whispered as the distance vanished between the ships. The Phantom's core detonated in a sphere of brilliant blue energy that expanded outward, engulfing the Void Hunter and dozens of nearby swarm vessels. The pulse rippled through space, temporarily blinding sensors across both fleets. When vision was restored, there was nothing left at the center of the explosion. But throughout the battlefield, swarm ships drifted powerless, their systems permanently disabled by the pulse. Earth's remaining ships moved in, systematically eliminating the helpless enemy vessels. Within hours, the greatest swarm fleet ever assembled had been reduced to debris floating in space. 1 month later, Admiral Walker stood at a podium before the remnants of Earth's military leadership. "The threat is not over," he said solemnly. "But for the first time, we have hope. The swarm has been pushed back beyond our borders, and we now possess the technology to keep them there." He gestured to a viewport where a new ship was taking shape in the construction dock. Sleeker than the Phantom, but clearly built on the same principles. "This is the first of our new defensive fleet, a ship that only existed in the mind of one engineer who refused to give up his dream." Walker paused. "We call it Fantasy's Edge, to honor those who sacrificed everything to give us a future." In the front row, Kate, Jack, and Marcus watched silently as the new ship's core powered up for the first time, its blue energy pulse bright against the darkness of space. Where some saw only a warship, they saw Tom Reed's legacy, a fantasy that had changed the tide of war.